The icy water of Lake Michigan was a brutal shock, but not as shocking as seeing the faces of my partners Marcus and Lena watching the car sink. They'd staged it perfectly. A tragic accident on a lonely stretch of road, all for the $10 million keyman policy we held at Sterling Indemnity. A clean, tragic payout for the grieving partners. They thought I was just a 48-year-old investigator buried in paperwork. They forgot what I investigate. They saw me as a liability to be cashed in. But they missed a crucial detail in my file. I had my own policy, one they never knew existed. And its payout wasn't in cash. It was in retribution. Sinking in the dark, my plan began. I crawled onto the frozen shore, my lungs burning with icy water. Across the black expanse, the lights of Chicago shimmered, indifferent. By now, Marcus and Lena would be back in the city, rehearsing their grief. Marcus Thorne was the architect. Our numbers man, a savant with risk assessment. To him, I wasn't a partner. I was an asset with a depreciating value and a $10 million liquidation price. He would have planned my death like a corporate merger, cold, efficient, and with zero room for sentiment. Every detail managed, every contingency calculated. Then, Lena Petrova, the smiling face of Sterling Indemnity. She could charm a confession out of a statue and sell a hurricane policy in a heat wave. She was the one who shook my hand this morning, her eyes full of feigned concern for my stress levels. Lena handled the people, the messy human element that Marcus despised. She made betrayal feel like a favor. Together they were the perfect predator, the brain and the lure. They thought their plan was flawless because they controlled all the variables, but they forgot the one thing I spent 20 years investigating. People. And I knew them better than they knew themselves. Shivering in the dark, my mind spooled back through the last 5 years. We built Sterling Indemnity from nothing in a cramped office overlooking a brick wall. I was the foundation, the grizzled investigator who knew every scam in the book because I'd seen them all. Marcus was the architect, a man who saw the world in spreadsheets and cold probabilities. And Lena was the gilded facade, her smile a weapon that closed impossible deals. We were the perfect team, a three-legged stool, balanced and strong, the lie I told myself every single morning. The first crack appeared 18 months ago. The Redwood claim, a massive warehouse fire, an open and shut case of arson I'd flagged from day one. But the client was powerful, and Lena had charmed them into a premium package that was now threatening to bleed us dry. Marcus saw the numbers, the potential for ruin, and he flinched. He cornered me in his office, the skyline of Chicago glittering behind him like a pile of diamonds. "Just sign off, Art," he'd said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It's a bad bet. We cut our losses. The cost of doing business is just business." "It's fraud, Marcus. We don't pay out on fraud." He just stared at me, his eyes like chips of ice. That's when I stopped being a partner in his eyes and became a variable he couldn't control. A liability on his perfect spreadsheet. We took the 7-figure hit, and the chill in the office became a permanent winter. After that, the whispers started. I'd walk into the conference room, and the silence would hit me like a physical blow. Lena's friendly chats became interrogations disguised as concern. "Taking that old car up the lake road this weekend, Art, all alone? You should be careful." Her smile never reached her eyes. Then Marcus started running, hypotheticals by me, complex insurance fraud scenarios over lunch. One was eerily specific. A single car accident on a deserted road, a keyman policy, a body lost to the cold, dark water. He called it a cold thought exercise. Cold tisk good. I should have called it a confession. They thought I was just a corporate man, softened by 2 decades behind a desk. They forgot what I was before Sterling. Before the corner office and tailored suits, my work wasn't about paperwork, it was about people. Dangerous people in dark alleys who taught me a cardinal rule. Trust is a luxury you can't afford, and survival is a matter of ruthless preparation. So, I prepared. For years, I built my own insurance policy. It's not a document filed away in some vault. It's a network. A series of safe houses, untraceable accounts, and favors owed by men who operate in the same shadows Marcus and Lena just foolishly stumbled into. They analyzed my life insurance policy down to the last comma. They never thought to analyze my life. They calculated the risk of killing Arthur Vance, the partner. They never, ever calculated the risk of me surviving. The first mile was the hardest, my body screaming in protest, fueled only by a cold, surgical rage. I bypassed my apartment, my car, my entire life. They were all part of a crime scene now, a mausoleum for a man who didn't exist anymore. My destination was a 24-hour laundromat in a part of town where no one asks questions. Inside, tucked behind a row of rattling dryers, was a payphone that hadn't been updated since the 90s. I fed it a handful of quarters, my fingers still numb. It rang twice. "Yeah," the voice was gravel, laced with old whiskey and suspicion. "Sully. It's me," I said, my own voice a raw whisper. "Package is compromised." A pause. Not of surprise, but of calculation. Location? The usual spot. West Loop. Activate the protocol. The line went dead. That's all it took. No sentiment, no shock. Just a switch being flipped. Sully was a relic from my old life. A man who understood that insurance sometimes meant more than a piece of paper. He dealt in contingencies. I was his most long-standing client. The safe house was a sterile, soulless apartment above a closed-down print shop. It smelled of dust and disuse, but everything was in its place. A duffel bag with cash and clothes, a laptop, sealed in plastic, and a set of IDs that belonged to a man named David Miller, a freelance consultant who didn't exist. For the next few hours, Arthur Vance was dead. David Miller was just getting started. I powered up the laptop, using a secure connection that bounced its signal off a dozen satellites before finding its way home. I found it immediately. The internal memo from Sterling Indemnity sent out an hour ago. Lena's words, dripping with synthetic sorrow. "With the heaviest of hearts, we must share the tragic news of Arthur Vance's passing." She'd already scheduled a memorial. Efficient. The news reports were worse. "Local businessman lost in tragic accident." They were quoting a preliminary police report. No sign of foul play. Marcus's work. Clean. Precise. He'd have scrubbed every detail, anticipated every angle. He'd think he'd achieved the perfect crime. But perfection is a fragile illusion. Marcus is a numbers man. He believes in systems, in predictable outcomes. Lena is a manipulator. She believes she can control people. Their plan relies on the absolute perfection of both. And that's the flaw. They trust each other's expertise completely. Marcus trusts Lena to handle the emotional fallout, the police, the narrative. Lena trusts Marcus to have engineered a technically flawless accident. They don't know I'm watching. They don't know I'm listening. And they have no idea that I'm about to introduce a new variable into their perfect equation. Me. My eyes scanned the police report again. It mentioned a witness. A truck driver who saw a car swerving erratically just before it went over the guardrail. He was briefly interviewed and dismissed. Marcus and Lena would have counted on that. A fleeting glimpse, a confused memory. But people are not numbers on a spreadsheet. They are messy, unpredictable, and sometimes they remember more than they think. The trucker. That's where I would start. I wasn't just going to dismantle their company. I was going to dismantle their trust. Piece by agonizing piece, using the very tools they thought made them invincible. The name came via encrypted text an hour later. Walt Koski, a long-haul driver for a regional freight company. The text included his route, his schedule, and his preferred 24-hour diner just over the state line in Wisconsin. Sully was thorough. Marcus planned for police procedure. He never planned for a ghost with a Rolodex from hell. Dressed in the drab, forgettable clothes of David Miller, I found Walt hunched over a plate of steak and eggs. He was a big man, with hands thick enough to palm a basketball and a face etched with the weariness of 1,000,000 highway miles. I slid into the booth opposite him. Mr. Koski? He looked up, his fork halfway to his mouth. His eyes were wary. Who's asking? David Miller. I pushed a crisp fake business card across the table. Midwest Risk Assessors, a shell company I'd set up years ago. I'm a secondary investigator on the Arthur Vance policy. The accident you witnessed. He grunted, chewing slowly. Told the cops what I saw. Car swerved, went through the rail, sad business. I nodded, keeping my voice level, professional. The police get the big picture. My company, we worry about the details. You said the car was erratic. Can you tell me more about that? He shrugged. Looked like a drunk, maybe, or fell asleep, weaving all over. Did you see anything else? Anything at all? I leaned forward just slightly. My clients pay for certainty. Any detail, no matter how small, helps close the file. Walt stopped chewing. He stared out the greasy window for a long moment, replaying the memory. There was another car, he said, his voice low. Maybe a quarter mile past the curve, a dark sedan, parked on the shoulder, lights off. My pulse quickened, but my face remained a mask of polite interest. Did you see anyone with it? Yeah, he said, finally looking at me. That was the strange part. 2 people, a man in a suit, a woman with blonde hair, just standing there, looking back. I thought maybe they'd called it in already, he frowned. Guess they didn't. Bingo, the variable. The one detail Marcus's meticulous planning couldn't control. A random witness seeing them linger to watch their masterpiece unfold. They weren't grieving partners rushing to the scene. They were spectators. I slid a cheap burner phone across the table. My direct line. You remember anything else, you call me, day or night. There's a finder's fee for details that clarify the record. He eyed the phone, then me. All right. I left him with his coffee and the seeds of doubt. They thought their plan was a sealed vault. I had just found the key. The next step wasn't to go to the police. It was to go to Lena. I was about to make a small, anonymous deposit into her life. A little piece of information that would turn Marcus's perfect cold equation into chaos. Lena Petrova was a creature of habit and performance. Every morning at 9:05 a.m., she would walk to the high-end espresso machine in the corner of our executive suite, the one she'd insisted on, and prepare a perfect macchiato. It was part of her routine, her stagecraft. A moment of calm before a day of masterful manipulation. I knew this because I had installed the suite's security system myself, years ago, ensuring I had a permanent, untraceable back door. From the grimy safe house, her office appeared on my laptop screen, a pristine cage for a beautiful predator. I typed out the email. The sender address was a ghost, routed through a dozen servers in countries that didn't talk to each other. The subject line was blank. The body of the message was only 10 words. 10 words designed to shatter her composure and crack the foundation of her trust in Marcus. Times a trucker on the lake road saw you both. Watching. I hit send and watched her on my screen. She was at the espresso machine, humming softly to herself, the picture of a partner bravely carrying on through tragedy. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up, her smile still lingering. As she read, the smile didn't just fade, it was ripped from her face. The porcelain cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the polished marble floor. She didn't flinch. Her eyes, wide with a terror she never showed her clients, were locked on the phone's screen. The mask was gone. This was the real Lena. She looked around the empty suite, her gaze darting towards the security camera in the corner. For a terrifying second, I thought she could see me, that she knew. But it wasn't recognition. It was paranoia, a sudden suffocating awareness that the walls had eyes, that her perfectly curated world was no longer secure. She didn't clean up the mess. She stormed from the kitchenette, phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip, and burst into Marcus's office without knocking. I switched my camera feed. Marcus was exactly where I knew he'd be, at his desk, staring at 3 monitors displaying market data and risk analysis charts. He looked up, his expression one of pure annoyance at the interruption. "What is it, Lena?" She threw her phone onto his desk. "What is this?" She hissed, her voice a strained whisper. "You told me it was clean. You told me it was perfect." Marcus picked up the phone, his face betraying nothing as he read the 10 words. He set it down calmly. "It's a bluff," he said, his voice flat. "Someone is fishing." "Fishing? Marcus, it's specific. The trucker, the road, someone knows." Her composure was completely gone, replaced by a frantic, raw-edged fear. "The witness the police interviewed? You said he was a non-issue. You said he saw nothing." "He didn't see anything," Marcus snapped, his icy calm finally cracking with irritation. "He saw a car swerving. That's all. This is an attempt to spook us." "Probably a low-level PI hired by the secondary underwriters for the policy. They're always looking for an angle to deny a claim. It's protocol." "This doesn't feel like protocol." Lena's voice rose, bordering on hysteria. She began pacing his office like a caged animal. "This feels like a noose. Someone saw us standing there. They saw us watching him go into the water. My God, Marcus, what if they have a picture? What if they call the police?" Marcus stood up, his towering frame exuding impatience. He walked around the desk and gripped her by the shoulders, forcing her to stop. "Get a grip, Lena," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "This is exactly why I handle the mechanics, and you handle the people. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. Our story is solid. We were at a dinner meeting downtown. We have receipts. We have witnesses. The timeline is airtight." "A timeline doesn't matter if a witness puts us at the scene of the crime," she shot back, pulling away from him. "There is no crime," he said, his eyes like steel. "There was a tragic accident. And there is no credible witness. This email is garbage, a scare tactic. We ignore it. We stick to the plan. We proceed with the memorial. We file the claim, and we mourn our fallen partner." Lena stared at him, her chest heaving. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, to retreat back into the safety of his cold, calculated confidence. But I knew Lena. Her entire life was built on reading people, on sensing their tells, their fears, their weaknesses. And right now, her instincts were screaming that Marcus's perfect equation had a fatal flaw. He saw a data point to be dismissed. She saw a person who could send them to prison for the rest of their lives. "You promised me it was flawless, Marcus," she said, her voice now dangerously quiet. "You promised me there were no variables." "There aren't," he insisted. "This is noise, nothing more." She shook her head slowly, backing towards the door. "I hope you're right," she whispered, but her eyes said she believed he was wrong. She left his office, closing the door softly behind her, leaving Marcus standing alone in a silence that was suddenly heavy with distrust. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Then he turned, walked to his window, and looked out over the city. He thought he was in control. He thought he was managing a minor, unexpected complication. He was wrong. Watching from my dark, anonymous room, I felt a grim satisfaction. The first crack was showing. Marcus believed in his system. Lena believed in her gut. I had just driven a wedge between the two, using nothing but 10 carefully chosen words. They built their plan on a foundation of mutual trust in each other's expertise. And I, the ghost in their machine, had just turned that foundation to sand. Marcus would now see Lena's fear as a liability. Lena would see Marcus's confidence as reckless arrogance. The two-headed monster was starting to turn on itself. And I was just getting started. Fear is a corrosive acid. It eats away at composure first, then trust. I watched Lena for the next 24 hours, through my hidden access to the office cameras. She was a ghost at her own desk. Her confident stride was gone, replaced by the hesitant shuffle of someone expecting a blow. She flinched every time her phone buzzed. She was drinking water, not espresso. Marcus's cold reassurances hadn't calmed her. They'd only isolated her in her own terror. It was time to give her fear some company. I picked up the burner phone and dialed Walt Koski. He answered on the first ring. "Yeah?" "Mr. Koski, David Miller. Following up. My firm has been cross-referencing vehicle registrations for cars known to be in that area. I need to ask you for a clarification." The dark sedan you saw parked on the shoulder. Would you describe it as a late-model Audi A8? Black? There was a pause. Could be, he said slowly. It was dark. Think hard, Walt, I said, my voice patient, encouraging. Sometimes the mind retains small details. Did you notice anything on the rear window? A sticker, maybe? Small? Circular? From a university? I was describing the alumni sticker for Northwestern that Lena displayed like a trophy. Another, longer pause. I could practically hear the gears turning as he stitched the memory I was giving him into the fabric of what he actually saw. You know, now that you mention it, I think there was something. Yeah. A sticker. Good, I said. That's very helpful. For this to have weight, it needs to be on the record. Go to the Sterling Indemnity website. There's a Report a Claim Irregularity link at the bottom of the page. It's anonymous. File a report. Mention the Audi, the color, the sticker. Just state what you saw. It gives the information an official timestamp and a layer of credibility. All right, Mr. Miller, I'll do it tonight. He was a good man, trying to do the right thing. He had no idea he was a scalpel in the hands of a ghost. The report landed in the Sterling Indemnity system at 10:17 p.m. I got the notification at the same time Lena and Marcus would have. Claim number 774KV, my own death, had a new addendum. I switched my view to Lena's office camera. She was working late, nursing a glass of what was definitely not water. The email alert popped onto her screen. She clicked. Her face, already pale under the office lights, turned the color of ash. She didn't shatter anything this time. She simply stood, printed the single-page report, and walked with chilling calm toward Marcus's office. He was still there, of course. Marcus treated the office like a fortress. She didn't knock. She threw the paper onto his desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped beside his keyboard. A bluff, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Scare tactic. Explain this one, Marcus. He picked up the report. I watched his eyes scan the text, his expression of detached superiority tightening ever so slightly. That was his tell. A subtle clenching of the jaw. He was seeing the words, Moral Tyleida Anonymous Submission. Witness Walter Koski. Black Audi A8. Northwestern alumni sticker on rear window. How, he finally said, the word a puff of air. How is this possible? That's what I'm asking you. Lena's voice cracked, the fury giving way to frantic fear. You told me it was clean. You said your plan was perfect. The police report just said dark sedan. Nobody knew I took my car except you. So how does a random trucker know the make, model, and the goddamn sticker on the back? He's being fed information. Marcus snapped, recovering, deflecting. Someone is getting to him. This has to be an inside job. Someone from the company. He stood and began to pace, the predator suddenly feeling the walls of the cage. Who have you been talking to, Lena? Who knows you were with me? The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. He was turning on her. In his mind, his plan couldn't be flawed. Therefore, the person must be. I saw the final remnants of their partnership evaporate in Lena's eyes. She didn't see a partner anymore. She saw a man who would throw her to the wolves to save himself. She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You are unbelievable. You drive us off a cliff and you're asking me if I buckled my seatbelt correctly. She turned without another word and walked out, leaving Marcus staring at the report. He wasn't looking at a witness statement. He was looking at a mathematical impossibility, an error in his code that he couldn't fix. I watched Lena return to her office. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve I knew all too well. It was the look of a cornered animal preparing to chew off its own leg to escape a trap. She sat at her desk, and with swift, decisive keystrokes, she began to type. She was building a firewall, not of code, but of lies. I watched her draft an email, her movements swift and precise. It was a masterpiece of corporate backstabbing. She was positioning herself as a whistleblower, a concerned partner forced to come forward after receiving disturbing anonymous information regarding the tragic death of Arthur Vance. She attached the trucker's report as evidence. She painted a picture of a grieving colleague whose quiet suspicions about Marcus's recent erratic behavior and the company's financial strain had just been terrifyingly validated. She wasn't calling the police. That would be an admission of guilt. Lena never admits guilt. She was calling our secondary underwriter, the reinsurer who held the real financial risk on my $10 million policy. She was offering them a perfectly plausible reason to deny the claim and launch a full investigation, pointing them directly and solely at Marcus Thorne. She was trading her partner for her freedom, using the very breadcrumbs I had laid for her as her path to salvation. The notification hit Marcus's inbox 15 minutes later. I had the feed to his monitor open. I saw the email pop up before he did. The subject line was a death sentence to his plan. Urgent. Policy number 774KV. Payment frozen, pending investigation. I watched him read it, then read it again. The mask of cold calculation didn't just crack, it disintegrated. For the first time, I saw raw, unfiltered emotion on his face. Disbelief, followed by the dawning, horrific understanding of betrayal. He slammed his fist on the polished surface of his desk, a single, violent crack that echoed in the silent office. It wasn't the sound of frustration. It was the sound of a god discovering he was mortal after all. They hadn't just lost $10 million. They had lost the only thing that made their plan work. Each other. I hadn't put them in jail yet. That would come later. But I had just won the war. I had sentenced them to something far worse. A prison of their own making, where the only other inmate was the person they now hated most in the world. From my dark room, I didn't smile. Vengeance wasn't a joy. It was a claim, and this was just the first payment. So now that you know the whole story, I need your advice. Do I go straight to the police with what I've found, or do I play their game a little longer and get my own kind of justice first?